This is the next video in the series for the UI Sampler Lab. We're going to focus on setting up all of the programming for the lab. This video is going to be broken up into smaller pieces, so make sure that you're looking for the other videos that go over the programming. They're going to be broken up based on getting all the different aspects of this done. So we're going to start with the buttons, move on to the slider, do the inputs, and last do the drop down. So don't miss those videos. Make sure you look for them. It'll make it a little bit easier to deal with. You can find the videos that you need if you need specific help in some areas. So the only thing I did between last video and this video is I did create my lab 2 script. To create a new C# script in Unity, just right click, create C# script. And make sure that when you're naming, there shouldn't be any spaces between lab and 02. It'll mess up problems. So make sure you name it this. If you accidentally click off without renaming it, it might just be easier to delete it and make a new one so that it's named correctly. The next thing that we need to do is we need to put this script on something inside of our game, or it will never run. The way that programming works in Unity is it has to be attached to a game object, even if it's not like moving a game object or like a character or a camera. It just needs something anchored into the scene so that it knows to run the script. So normally throughout the semester we'll be making an object called like a UI controller or maybe a game controller. So if you see those words in other videos, that's what we're talking about. So for this one, we're going to make an object called UI controller. Keep in mind that if we create a new object, right click, in here, there's nothing in here called UI controller. What we are going to do is we're going to create an empty. This is just an empty game object. There's nothing associated with this. See, it just has position, rotation, scale, nothing else. It's just a blank object in our scene. You can kind of think of this almost like a folder. Like it can hold stuff. We could add some components, but there's nothing in it. So it comes in as game object, but that's not very descriptive. So we're going to rename this one UI controller. And we are going to add the script to it. Even though there's nothing in here yet, really, it's not going to do anything, but we're just setting up this part of it so that we don't have to worry about it later. So I'm going to click and drag, and you see I get that blue line. I'm going to release it, and so our script is now attached to this UI controller. Remember, this doesn't exist in here. We created an empty and we renamed it to UI controller. So don't get confused looking for something called this. This is something that we made ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to double click on my script so that I can go into Visual Studio. We are using Visual Studio in this class, not MonoDevelop. And we can take a look at what we have. To start off with, we do have a start event and an update event. Start events and update events. Oops, sorry about that. This is an event-driven program. Code doesn't execute unless an event happens. A start event works by when the game starts, it'll execute any code we have in here. An update event works where it is called once per frame, so roughly about 30 times a second. It'll execute whatever code is in here. We actually don't need these for our lab today, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete these out, just so we're not getting kind of confused. No reason to keep those in there if we're not going to use them. So what we're going to focus on for this video right now is just setting up those 4 button events here. And the easiest one is going to be the quit button. I'm going to give you guys the code that you type in that you just use in every single program if you ever just need to exit out of the application. This will make sure that the application closes. Keep in mind, though, that this does not work inside the Unity editor. We would not want the Unity editor to close when we click our close button or quit button. So this will work out when we actually build out the game at the end. But let's just start off with some button events. So what we need to do is, since we're not using the start or the update, we have to write our own events. And keep in mind that these names don't come from like a specific place. Like you can't Google these names. These are names that we come up with that are descriptive so that we know what they're doing. So it's not like I'm pulling some secret knowledge from somewhere that this is what it has to be called. We come up with these names. It's up to us to make them descriptive so that we know what they're meant to do. So the first one we're going to do is the quit button. So we need to type public. This needs to be a public event so that we can access it inside the Unity engine. If we don't write public, we're not going to be able to hook this up to any buttons. So public void on quit button click. And we're doing camel case, so no spaces. The beginning letter of each word is capitalized, so it's a little bit easier to read. And don't forget our parentheses at the end. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to create my curlies. We always need these curly brackets. These are the curly brackets for the whole program. These ones are associated with this event. So anything between these is going to execute when we have our on click button click event. All we need to do to make our application quit is we're going to start typing application. Oops, not that one. Application.quit. That's it. We know that it's working correctly because we have this should be teal. If it's not teal, if you're having issues with things not auto-completing, make sure this says assembly C#. If this doesn't say assembly C#, that means that your Visual Studio is not hooked up to your Unity. It's looking for another editor, so you would need to fix that inside the Unity engine. But this is it. That's all we have to do. We should probably leave a little comment for ourselves. This event quits the application. And let's save this and let's go back to Unity so that we can hook this event up. So we see the little asterisk. That means this has not been saved. So if we go back to Unity, our changes won't translate over. So I'm going to hit Control S to save, or you can hit the save button right here. Notice the asterisk is gone. That's a good test. Make sure to know that if we saved it or not. So I'm going to pop back over to Unity, and we can see that it did change underneath here. So this, we can't edit in here. This is kind of a preview, but we can tell that our new thing was added. So what we need to do now is hook up that event to this quit button. So when we select the button and we come over here, we can see that we have an on click. This is what happens when our button is clicked, and right now we don't have anything. So to add an event to this, we hit the plus button, and then we have to tell it what object is this script attached to. Hopefully you remember what it is. Remember, we created that UI controller object that all it's doing is holding our script. So we need to put this in here. This can be a little bit tricky at first. We need to kind of click and drag to drop. Don't accidentally just click on our UI controller object because it'll select it. You have to have the button selected, and it's a click and drag, like a click and hold, so that we don't accidentally select it. So once we have this here, we have to find the event here that we want to have happen from our script when that button's clicked. So I'm going to click this. Lab 2, that's our script. That's what we're looking for. And we want our on quit button click event. So I'm going to select that, and we're good to go. That's all we have to do. Again, if we hit play, nothing is going to happen when we click this button. Oops, I got to fix that. Because our There you go. Our quit button only works when we build it out, and that will be in our very last video. We're going to build out this project so you can see that. But for now, we just have it done because it was an easy one to accomplish. The next thing we're going to want to do is our reset button. What's going to happen is when this button is clicked, we're going to reload the scene so that when we get our other stuff working, where we'll be able to rotate our text here, be able to make our test text bigger or smaller, be able to do some numbers. We'll be able to change it to a random number. If that gets all messed up, we can hit reset and it'll reload everything so that it's back to as if we just started the game. So let's go back to Visual Studio and let's make a new event. We need to make sure that we're going below this, but we're not going outside of these curly brackets. Visual Studio has a nice little dotted line to make sure that, we can see who's associated with what bracket. So we're going to just go below this one. It needs to be another public because we need to be able to access it. If you made this and you saved it and you went back over to Unity and you couldn't find this as a possible thing for your button, you probably forgot to put public. It has to be explicitly labeled as public or it's going to be private. You won't be able to see it inside of Unity. So make sure you do public, void, on reset button click. That's a pretty good name. Again, we're coming up with these names. We could call this whatever we want, but we want to make it descriptive. And on reset button click is exactly what's going to have happen. So in order for this to work, we have to add a new thing here at the top. By default, we don't load every single possible thing that the code can use. It would be kind of clunky that way. We only load things in as we need them. So in order to do scene management, we have to go in and add a new thing up here. So up here at the top, we're going to type using Unity Engine dot scene management, and it should start to autocomplete. And don't forget your semicolon at the end. You might want to make a little note to yourself so that you can refer back to this at a later time, like if you're doing stuff regarding scene management, if you need to do a reload, you know how to do that. You already have one that works. You could just come and copy this code, but this is needed to reset scene. So you know that we need this. So to reset, all we have to type, and it's a little bit long of a code. I'll explain it after I finish typing it, what exactly this means. Scene manager, and I am going to use the autocomplete. No reason to type it all out. Dot load scene in parentheses, scene manager again, dot get active scene, parentheses, dot name, and finish it off with our semicolon. So it's long. It makes sense though when we break this down. Scene manager dot load scene. This is what you use to load a scene, and that's what we want to do. We want to reload what we have. What scenes are going to load? We're going to look at what the current scene is and get its name. Because we could, this is the code that you could use also to load like the next scene. We could just get the name of the next, like if you had multiple scenes in your game, we would just put that name in here. But we just want to load what is their current active scene. So this is the code to do that. Let me zoom in real close, a little bit closer in case you can't quite read it on your monitor, so you can make sure that you have it copied correctly. If you're getting like a little squiggly error or something, or it wasn't auto-completing, most likely the problem is you forgot to do this up here. So do this first up here at the top so that we can use it here. And we can then save this and head back to Unity to hook up our reset button. Same process. I'm going to click on my reset button to select it. I'm going to find our events, which is the on-click event here. I'm going to add a new one. I need to click and drag my UI controller over into the object so that it knows this is where the script is. And I'm going to find it, instead of no function, I'm going to look in our lab 2 and locate my on reset button click. Since this is a public event, it is visible here. If it's not visible, you forgot to type public. This is why it's nice to give it easy to recognize names. We know exactly what this one is. We don't want to call it like event 1 or event 2 because it could get kind of confusing. We know this is the correct event. And it's good to go. It's still not going to do too much yet because, we can't change anything yet. So we hit reset. It does reset it, but we haven't made any changes to our text, so it doesn't look like anything actually happens yet. So let's do our first alteration. We are going to work on the rotate button so that when we click it, our test text here rotates 90 degrees. So each time we click it, it would rotate 90, 90, 90, 90. And if you remember from geometry class, if we click it 4 times, it would do a complete circle 360 to go back around this way. If you want to alter it, you can, but for us, you could do maybe 45 if you wanted to, but 90 degrees is good enough. So let's go back to our script, and we need to do one thing before we start typing in our button, our new event for our button. Even though this is hooked up to the UI controller, it still doesn't know what this is, like this test text object. It can't like read it automatically, look at the scene and say, oh, that's what we mean. We need to directly tell the program, this is the text object we want to manipulate. So we do that by declaring a public variable in here at the class level, at top of the program. If you remember your scope, if we put it up here, we're going to declare it up here. If we put it up here, it's accessible to every other event. We don't want to put it inside an event because of scope, because then it would be only accessible to that specific event. We're going to use it in multiple places. We're going to use it for this stuff over here, for all of these things. So we want to make sure that we can access it anywhere. We do have to add one more thing up here. By default, we don't have anything, we don't have the stuff to do UI stuff. So we have to make sure that we add that here at the top. So we're going to type using Unity Engine .ui. Make a little note to yourself, needed for UI stuff. Good enough. This is for you, so if you ever need to look back on this, you know why we added this here. So up here, we're going to declare a variable that is a text object, and it's public. And you're going to see, I'm going to do it the wrong way, so you can see what happens when we do it the wrong way, and then I'm going to show you the right way. So do this part. We're going to say text, because this is a text object, and I'm going to call this one test text. Because ultimately, we do want to kind of keep the naming scheme the same. So the object in the Unity engine is called test text. Since we have to mess with it in here, it makes sense to call it the same thing, just so we don't confuse ourselves. So let's go to Unity. We'll save it. We forgot to save it. And what we're expecting is, if we go to our UI controller and we look at our script, we're supposed to see this here, but we don't. Because, like I said, I'm purposely kind of doing it the wrong way just to kind of illustrate something. Because if we don't put the word public in front of it, if we don't make this a public variable, it means that Unity doesn't, we can't see it inside the Unity engine. So if you ever do this and you can't see this, it's because you didn't say public. We don't want to do this for all of our variables up here. There are times where we will have a variable at the top that we want to keep private, because we don't want the designers to have access to it, because for one, it doesn't make sense. Like, what if we were doing some circle math in here and we had a nice static variable for pi, Probably don't want to make that public. We would make that a private variable because we wouldn't want that to accidentally be changed. So we only put public for things that need to be public. So we'll do public, we'll make sure that it's saved, pop back over to Unity, let it load, and notice that we now have test text. This is this. So now these two things we're talking back and forth, so we can tell it what is test text. It doesn't know by automatically. So we are going to do something. We're going to do another click and drag, kind of like when we add the UI controller to the button. Locate test text right here, click and drag, and drop it in here. We could also click the little circle button, and it'll show us, it might have popped over, if you're dual monitoring, it might be over in the other screen, all of the text objects, and we could select it here as well. So now that this is here, if we make changes to this in our code, it'll make changes to this object in our game. That's how we kind of connect the two up. So we're going to do a rotate event on that rotate button. So we're going to make sure that we're below this and we're not going outside of this one. Public void on rotate button click. And we will then tell the program that when the button's clicked, rotate this text here 90 degrees. And the way that we do this is we type test text, because that's that object. And I'm going to pop back over to Unity just to kind of illustrate this. We have rotation, like the rotation right here. So test text, we want to go inside that object's rect transform, and we want to perform a rotation on it. And we want to rotate it 90 degrees. So, the wording makes sense. Test text dot rect form, and then we're going to do a rotate. So test text dot rect transform is named the same thing, dot rotate. And we're not doing, the reason we're doing a rotate and not just changing rotation is this is actually going to cause it to turn rather than telling it exactly the coordinates we want of the rotation. We actually want it to turn 90 degrees every single time we click it. So we do a rotate rather than just changing the actual transform numbers. So inside of here, we got to tell it how much we want it to rotate. We only want it to rotate 90 degrees on the x-axis. So, but we have to still give it a vector 3, an x, y, and z. But we know x is going to be 0, so we type 0f, comma, for the x, 0f for the y, and then 90f for the z. Again, if you want to rotate a different amount each time it's clicked, you would change this number here. But we don't need to rotate it on the x and y because it would look strange. We just want it to rotate here. And that's it. That's all we have to do a rotate. So let's save it, go back to Unity, and let's just hook up this button. Same process as before. So I'm not really going to go through it step by step. I mean, you can watch me do it, but I'm not going to really explain what I'm doing. And we actually have something now that should do something when we hit play. So make sure it's all saved. And let's hit play. So let's hit rotate, and our text should be rotating. Things, if this isn't working, maybe you forgot to tell it in the UI controller what your test text is. That's one possibility. Maybe you forgot to hook up your button. You got excited and hit play and didn't hook your button up. That's usually the other possibility. So we got to rotate, and we can now test to see if our reset works. So if we hit reset, it goes back to normal. Again, quit's not going to work, not inside the editor. So now we just have one more button to do, our random number button, so that when this button is clicked, the test text changes to a random number. This is a good exercise because we do random numbers in games all the time. In the majority of your labs, in the majority of your work here, you probably will be doing a random number in some capacity. It's used everywhere. So we might as well get working code to get a random number working now. So I'm going to make a new event called, let's see, public void on random click. And Unity has its own built-in random number generator. C# also has a different one, but I prefer for Unity projects just to use their random number generator. It's a lot easier to use than the C# one. So if you are going to do a C# program outside of Unity, you have to do your random numbers a different way. But the Unity one is really easy to use. So I am going to kind of do some extra steps just so if you're new to programming, it'll kind of help explain some stuff better. If you're more advanced and you want to do this all in one line, more power to you, but I will explain what I'm doing as I go. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a variable that's an integer, because we want an integer is a whole number to hold our random number. So I'm going to write int random number, and it's declared. Next, I'm going to give it a random number. So I'm going to say random number is equal to, and in the Unity engine to do a random number, we just start typing random dot range. And in the parentheses behind it, we give it the range. So the first number is what number do you want to start at? So maybe like a 0, or maybe like a 1. You could also do like a -5, 23, whatever number you want. But that's the number that it will start at and include that number. We then do a comma, and then we do the number we want to go up to, but not including. And this is kind of an important concept. So like if we did 10, it would be 0 through 9. If we want to include 10, we'd have to do 0 through 11. So we'd get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, but it does not include 11. So don't forget that. You might want to make a little note, like a little comment, up to, but doesn't include 11. Something like that. You could end up having logic errors later on in later programs, like if you have to go up, include a number, keep in mind it's up to but not including. So now our integer variable called random number is holding a random number between 0, it would be 0 to 10, or 0 to 11 not inclusive. Sometimes you might hear it called that. The next thing we have to do is tell this text object to display that number. So I'm going to pop back over to Unity just for 1 second and text. So what we're looking for is to change the text. So if we do text dot text is equal to something else, it'll change this. So it will no longer say test, it'll have our number instead. So let's go back to Visual Studio, and we're going to say text dot text is equal to random number. And we are going to get a small error. These text objects don't like it when we try to put a non-string in them. They're very, very picky. Normally, if we had like a string like this, and we said number is equal to random, I guess it is still, like, we still can't do this. So in other languages, it lets you, but if we hover over it, Like if you're used to, I know like Python, I believe it doesn't really care about this. I believe JavaScript doesn't really care. It's not, we have to convert from an integer to a string. So if we hover over it, it gives us that error, like cannot implicitly convert type into string. Some languages do. This one does not. So it's not, it's very picky about that, but that's okay. This is very easy. And if we get it working once and you ever need to reference it, you can come back and look at the script. So all we have to do is on the end here, do dot to string. That's it. Make a little note how to change int to string so that you remember you're going to be using this a lot. If you ever forget, it is a quick Google search away. I am certain that if you Google C# int to string, you probably don't even have to go into a website. It'll probably even have it in like the little description of how to do this. So you're going to be using this a lot, so don't forget this. And honestly, that's it. That's all we have to do to change it to a random number. So let's save it and hook up our button. This is our last button. So this should be really easy. We've done this a bunch of times already. So UI controller. Oops, missing a step. Sorry about that. Add this. And save it. So our rotate still works. And a random number. We probably want to click it, make sure that we are getting everything that we expect. We can still rotate it too. Oh, there's our 10. Good. I think we've got all the numbers. And we can reset it, and it goes back to the original. Okay, so we have all of those buttons done. The next one we're going to do in the next video is we're going to set up the slider so that when we slide it, the text will get bigger or smaller. So hopefully you continue on. Hopefully this was useful to you, and I'll see you in the next video.